We are ready to begin.
Good.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the over 200 people who are joining us today for 6 days, 50 years, and the future of Israel, a webinar with Israel's Deputy Minister for Public Diplomacy, Dr. Michael Oren. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and is on the record. My name is Jennifer Raskus, and I'm the Director of the Israel Action Center at the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. I would like to thank Alexa Schwartz, our Israel Action Associate Director, for all her help organizing this call. The JCRC is the public affairs and community relations arm of the Greater Washington Jewish community, representing more than 100 organizations and synagogues throughout the region. A key component of our work is empowering, training, and mobilizing our community to engage with and advocate for Israel. We invite you to visit our website, jcouncil.org, and particularly our new 6-day war digital toolkit, filled with original lesson plans, programming ideas, and historical, analytic, personal narrative, arts, and geography resources at www.jcouncil.org/6daywar. Through our events and briefings, we aim to provide our constituents the opportunity to engage with a variety of experts, policymakers, and thought leaders. We are thrilled to welcome Deputy Minister Dr. Michael Oren as we are marking the 50th anniversary of the 6-day war. Dr. Oren will contextualize the events which led to the war and analyze its legacy and implications for Israel's future. Many of us in the Greater Washington area fondly remember when Deputy Minister Dr. Oren, a current member of Knesset's Kulanu party, served as Israel's ambassador to the United States between 2009 and 2013. Dr. Oren has written extensively on Middle Eastern history and is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Power, Faith, and Fantasy, and 6 Days of War, June 1967, and the Making of the Modern Middle East. In 2015, he published Ally, My Journey Across the American-Israel Divide. Dr. Oren has been a visiting professor at Harvard, Yale, and Georgetown, as well as Tel Aviv and Hebrew universities. He was a distinguished fellow at the Shalem Center in Jerusalem, a contributing editor to the New Republic, and an analyst of Middle Eastern affairs for CNN. After Dr. Oren speaks, we will begin Q&A. If you have a question, please click the Q&A button on your screen to submit a question. Please remember that questions should be kept short and to the point. And a friendly reminder that questions end with a question mark. Now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Deputy Minister, Dr. Michael Oren.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and shalom, everyone from Israel. It's a great pleasure to be with the JCRC. Thank you for everything you do for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. The 50th anniversary of the 6-day war. A while ago, as Jennifer said, I wrote a book about it called 6 Days of War, and it opens with a general observation about wars in history, whether it be the Civil War, World War II. Wars in history invariably become wars of history. No sooner did the guns fall silent when the historians, the pundits, the commentators step in and begin debating whether the war was justified, was it preventable, was the outcome positive, was it disastrous? And few wars of history have proven as controversial as the 6-day war because it involved the Holy Land, a land that is holy to more than half of humanity, because the outcome of that war was so dramatic, and because it shaped the modern Middle East in so many profound ways. That war opens us up to a particularly bitter battle of history. And those of you who are following the pages of your own Washington Post, the New York Times of the last few days, you see how bitter that battle has become. And the battle lines are very clearly drawn. On one side, you're going to have those who claim that the 6-day war was a war that was planned in advance by Israel with territorial expansion in mind, that Israel, after the war, rejected all overtures by the Arabs for peace, all opportunities for peace, a war of colonialism, a war of oppression, and ultimately a war of occupation and even apartheid. On the other side of the battle line, a war that Israel desperately struggled to prevent, did not anticipate, did not plan. A war which, yes, was a war of survival for the Jewish state, an existential war. And after that war, Israel reached out its hand repeatedly to the Arabs for peace, only to have that hand battered away. So here you have those two battle lines. And how is this battle to be decided? To decide it, we got to go back. It's very problematic to view the past through the prism of the present. So to really get a sense of why and how this battle can be won, we have to go back and get a snapshot of Israel on June 4th, 1967, the day before the war. What does Israel look like? It's a small state, it's about the size of the state of New Jersey, but it has a very narrow border of 9 miles wide. That's about as wide as the Beltway. And with its back to the water, it's got Arab armies on all of its border. The Syrian army is 10 yards from the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. The West Bank has been annexed by the Jordan army. Jordanian army is in East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is divided from West Jerusalem by a wall over which Arab snipers regularly shoot at Israeli civilians, and Israelis are denied the opportunity, the right to visit their holy sites, particularly the Western Wall, which is in the old city. Virtually all Jewish sites are in the eastern part of the city. To the south, there is a UN peacekeeping force that had been put in place in the aftermath of the previous Arab-Israeli war in 1956. But on May 16, 1967, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, summarily evicted that force. The UN didn't object, and Nasser sent his army streaming back into Sinai and deploying along Israel's southern border. The Egyptian army was also in occupation of the Gaza Strip. June 4th, 1967. Israel is completely isolated in the world. China is a hostile country, backing our enemies. India is a hostile country. There's an entity known as the Soviet bloc, the Soviet Union, and 12 satellite nations, all of them hostile to the state of Israel. Israel has an alliance, has a friendship with the United States, but not a strategic alliance with the United States. The Israeli forces did not have a single American bullet in 1967. In fact, Israel had one ally and one ally only, and that was France. And on the night before the war, the French switched sides. Israel, a nation of 2.5 million people, many of them survivors of the Holocaust, refugees from oppression in Arab lands. Anybody over the age of 23 would remember the War of Independence, when the Egyptians almost conquered Tel Aviv, when the Jewish population of Jerusalem was under siege, 100,000 Jews without water and food, and 1% of the population was killed. So a deeply traumatized and isolated population surrounded on all sides. When Nasser closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping from Eilat, and through Eilat, Israel received all of its oil supplies in 1967, the Arab world went into a frenzy. Massive demonstrations in Damascus and Beirut and Baghdad. King Hussein of Jordan placed his army directly under Egyptian command. The Syrians made a military pact with Egypt. If Egypt went to war, Syria went to war. So too did the Iraqis. And Israel is completely alone. Faced with this situation, Prime Minister Levi Eshkol of Israel pleaded with Arab leaders through back channels not to go to war, personal letters to King Hussein of Jordan, and he pleaded with international leaders to find a diplomatic solution. None of them could help. Lyndon Johnson, a very pro-Israel president, tried to find a diplomatic answer, but his hands were tied by the Vietnam conflict. And nobody in the United States, including Israel's best friends in Congress, wanted to see the United States get bogged down in another crisis elsewhere in the world. So on the evening of June 5th, I think of June 4th to June 5th, Israel had decided to strike preemptively. And the strike was very, very limited in its scope, very limited. The idea was to neutralize the Egyptian Air Force, which was Israel's biggest threat. Israel had dug 10,000 graves in Tel Aviv and was convinced it wouldn't be enough should the Egyptian Air Force strike first, and eliminate the first of 3 offensive military lines that the Egyptian army had established along Israel's border. That was it. The idea of conquering all of the Sinai Peninsula, of reaching the Suez Canal, of capturing the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, of liberating Jerusalem, of conquering the Golan Heights, none of it was anticipated. None of it was calculated or planned. And Israel went to war on the morning of June 5th, unsure, by the way, of whether the United States would stand by Israel, whether the United States would stand, or the Soviet Union would attack Israel. Egypt was an ally of the Soviet Union. And within a matter of hours, the Egyptian Air Force was destroyed, mostly on the ground, the greatest air battle victory in history. Israeli forces punched through that Egyptian first defense line, but it collapsed. And the Israeli army kept on going through the second defense line, through the third line. And within a matter of days, Israeli soldiers find themselves at the Suez Canal, where they had no intention of going. The Jordanian army was under Egyptian command. The Egyptian army gave the command to the Jordanian army to begin attack. And Jordan attacked Israel in 3 different ways. Long-range Jordanian guns, American-supplied guns, began shelling the outskirts of Tel Aviv. Jordanian artillery in Jerusalem began shelling West Jerusalem. About 25 Israelis were killed in the first hour. And Jordanian infantry began to move both in the north and the south of the city to surround it, much as they had done in 1948. In the north, hundreds of Syrian guns rained tens of thousands of shells on Israeli towns and kibbutzim and farms, just a total hailstorm of artillery in the north. So while Israel was advancing in the south, it turned, it pivoted, and it struck back at Jordan, and it struck back at Syria. And the rest, as they say, is history. Within 6 days, Israel had reunited Jerusalem. Israel had captured the Golan Heights, had captured Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, all the Sinai Peninsula. Israel had roughly quadrupled the size of the territory under its control. But what has to be stressed here is that even during the fighting, at every major stage, before liberating the old city of Jerusalem, before mounting the Golan Heights, Israel stopped and asked the other side to stop fighting. On the morning of June 7th, as Israeli paratroopers were preparing to enter the old city of Jerusalem, Levi Eshkol wrote another letter to King Hussein and said, "Your Majesty, my paratroopers are about to conquer the old city, liberate the old city. If you agree to a ceasefire, if you evict those Egyptian officers from Jordanian soil, if you agree to a peace process with the state of Israel, my paratroopers will not enter the old city." So here you have the first leader of an independent Jewish nation in 2,000 years, whose soldiers are within several hundred yards of the holy site Judaism. The Israeli government was willing to forfeit that historic opportunity for the opportunity of peace with one Arab nation. A week after the war, the Israeli government voted to return almost all of this captured territory in the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights to Egypt and Syria in return for peace. The answer were the three no's of Khartoum: no peace, no negotiations, no recognition. Israel canvassed 181 Palestinian notables on the West Bank about the possibility of establishing an autonomous Palestinian entity in the West Bank. This is in the summer of 1967. All 181 of them said no. Irrespective, in November of 1967, Israel supported UN Resolution 242, which contained two crucial principles that hold to this day. One is that it is the right of every state in this region to peace and to secure and recognize borders. The other principle is territory for peace. Israel will return territory, not all the territory, but territories captured in the 1967 conflict to Arab states in return for peace. Now, on the basis of 242, Israel eventually will achieve peace with Egypt. And on the basis of peace with Egypt, Israel will eventually achieve peace with Jordan. And as a result of the 6-day war, there's a tremendous infusion of Jewish identity, both in Israel. It's that reunification of the land of Israel with the state of Israel. Haifa is not in the Bible, but Hebron is. Among American Jews, those of you of my generation will remember what it did for us as Jews, so-called enabling us to stand with our back straight and what it meant for Jewish identity. I think the biggest impact was among Soviet Jews. For the 3 million Soviet Jews languishing behind the Iron Curtain, oppressed, unable to express their Jewishness, facing prison sentences for in Siberia for merely studying Hebrew, the 6-day war gave them the courage, the inspiration to stand up. And with the plowshares we made of our swords from the Egyptian and Jordanian peace agreements, we were able to absorb nearly 1 million of those former Soviet Jews in Israel, and they transformed Israeli society. All this because of the 6-day war. And let's not forget, it's on the 7th day, as it were, of the war that American policymakers wake up and say, whoa, there's this powerhouse of a country in the Middle East that just defeated 2 Soviet-backed armies. It's pro-American. It's unreservedly democratic. Maybe we should have a strategic alliance with that state. Thus was born the U.S.-Israel Strategic Alliance, which has become the most multifaceted and deepest alliance which the United States has had with any foreign power in its post-World War II period. Perhaps most paradoxically, one of the most transformative impacts of the 6-day war were on the Palestinians. With Jordan annexing the West Bank, Egypt occupying Gaza militarily, no one was talking about a Palestinian state back in 1967. No one was talking about the Palestinians at all. If you look back at the Western media in 1967, when they were referring to a Palestinian, they were referring to a Palestinian Jew before 1948. And it's only in the aftermath of the 6-day war that the Palestinians stopped looking to Nasser and Nasserism to bring about their solution to their problem. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, which had been created as a straw organization by Nasser, emerges as a serious power in the Middle East, headed by Yasser Arafat. And it's only 7 years later, and many high-profile terrorist attacks later, 1974, Yasser Arafat is already getting a standing ovation in the General Assembly of the UN. So this is a profound transformation. And you scoot ahead today, the fact that you have a president of the United States coming to Israel on his first foreign sojourn, visiting the hotel, a president who flies directly from Saudi Arabia, because our relations with Saudi Arabia and other Sunni states are closer today than any other time in history. The fact that we are all talking about getting the Palestinians and the Palestinian leadership back to a negotiating table, exploring the possibilities once again for peace, all of that is a direct result of the 1967 war. And I think you get a sense of where I come down on the battle lines here. And I look to all of us in this war. In the last war, in 1967, that battle was won by young Israeli soldiers, men and women, very brave. But this battle will be done by all of us. We will all be combatants in this battle. And the battle will not be fought in the sands of Sinai, on the Golan Heights. It won't be fought in the streets of Jerusalem. It'll be fought in the media. It'll be fought in classrooms, in campuses, on the internet. That's where it'll be fought. And it won't be fought with guns or tanks or planes. It'll be fought with facts and information, and above all, truth. It'll be fought with the truth. And the truth is the most powerful weapon we have. And armed with that truth, I ask us all to go forward and engage in this battle. And you see in the pages of our papers in the last few days, it is a true battle. To wage it, and to wage it bravely, confident in our truth. And we, just as those brave soldiers in 1967, we too will win. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you. I now want to remind everyone who is on the call that you can submit a question by clicking. You put your arrow to the bottom of the screen. You should see a little Q&A folder. And if you click on it, you can type your question, and I'm happy to ask the question of Dr. Oren. Dr. Oren, perhaps while we're waiting for some questions to come in, there are some recent developments that just happened in the Middle East with Qatar. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about that and maybe connect it to, as you were saying, our relationships with Saudi Arabia and all these things that sort of flowed from 1967.
Thank you, Jennifer. I was just came off Fox News talking about the decision with but it's simply this. Much of the Middle East has had it with Islamic extremism and with those states that support Islamic extremism. Qatar, first among them. And it's interesting, this also in many ways relates to the Six-Day War. Before 1967, the major ideology in this region was Pan-Arabism or nationalism. And it was an avowedly secular movement. And when Israel discredited Nasserism and Pan-Arabism in the Six-Day War, it opened the door to another movement which had long existed in this region, and that is Islamic extremism. And as Pan-Arab, there are a few Pan-Arabist regimes left in the region, not many. There was one in Iraq. There was one in Syria. Those two countries don't exactly exist anymore. But they have largely been discredited. And the Islamicists, the jihadists have stepped in. And they've done it with a tremendous amount of resources, some by traditional countries in the Gulf or individuals in the Gulf, certainly by Iran in its Shiite form. And so this is a very significant development. A line has been drawn in the Middle Eastern sand between those countries on one side, which include Israel and these Gulf countries, Jordan and Egypt, who oppose Islamic extremism and oppose jihadism, and those countries which still are giving money to those who seek to take down our civilization. So I think it's a very significant development indeed. We welcome it.
Great, thank you so much. We have our first questions from our participants. The first question comes from Deborah Foyer, who says that she remembers you fondly when you were here in DC. She asks, she wants to know, since you did mention that we're all sort of on the front lines now when it comes to Israel, she says, how do you answer the argument that the Israeli government's expansion of settlements, and tolerance for outposts create facts on the ground and make it harder to create a Palestinian state, and thereby contradict the claim that Israel is trying to support and establish a Palestinian state.
Well, I'll not deny that settlements are a source of controversy. They're a source of controversy even in this country, and we can't generalize about settlements, because even in Jerusalem right now, over half of the Jewish population of Jerusalem live over what were the 1967 lines, and for the most part in Jerusalem, nobody knows where those 1967 lines even are. Certainly that's the case in southern Jerusalem, those who know the neighborhoods of Gilo, etc. Can you see me? I just went blank for a second. All the settlements, after 50 years, all the settlements account for something less than 2% of the entire West Bank. If there's a desire on the part of the Palestinian leadership, if there actually is a Palestinian leadership that is willing and able to sign a peace treaty with us, settlements will not be the obstacle. They would not be the obstacle. When we made an offer in 2000 of a Palestinian state in all of Gaza, half of Jerusalem, we were willing to redivide our capital, and almost all of the West Bank, they turned it down. Palestinians turned it down not because of settlements. 2008, again, an even more generous offer was made, not because the settlements did Abu Mazen, the president of the Palestinian Authority, walk away from that deal. Not because of the settlements have the Palestinians refused to negotiate with us for the last 8 years. As part of the battle surrounding 1967, I published an article in the New York Times the other day that said to understand that this is not about the territories captured in 1967. It begins with 1917, with the Palestinian Arab refusal to accept the notions contained in the Balfour Declaration, which is that there is a Jewish people endowed with the right of self-determination to live as a free people in our homeland. It's an atikva, basically. And they will not accept it. And that's why they turned down the two-state solution that was offered them in 1937 by the British. It's why they turned down the two-state solution that was offered them by the UN in 1947, because the price of accepting an independent Palestinian state was prohibitive for them. And that price was accepting an independent Jewish state. Until they do that, not the settlements, but that refusal remained the ultimate obstacle to peace.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question comes from Joshua Harari. He says, can you explain the logic of connecting peace between Israel and the Palestinians and sort of the chaos that has broken out across Syria and elsewhere in the Arab world? So I guess connecting what's going on in the rest of the Arab world with specifically trying to make peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
Well, on one hand, I think that what has occurred since 2011 in our region proves indisputably that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict, is not the core conflict in the Middle East. 500,000 Syrians have been butchered about 2 hours north of where I'm speaking to you right now, not because of Israeli settlements, not because of the West Bank, not because of Gaza. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. We ripped up 21 settlements. We didn't get peace. We got rockets. We got thousands of rockets shot at us. So it's not about the settlements there either. Where the situation in the Middle East impacts the peacemaking process is to sound a note of warning. When we talk about a two-state solution, we have to think about what are we actually saying when we say two-state solution. Is the Palestinian leadership in Ramallah, which is unelected and corrupt, which doesn't control its own territory, which won't even stand for elections because it knows that Hamas will win, is it capable and able of sustaining a state structure? Or will it, like far larger states, Syria and Iraq, will it unravel? Will it become chaos? Can you hear me? Jennifer, you can hear me, okay. Okay. Will it become a Hobbesian chaos of Syria and Iraq? And the chances are, yes, that if we created a Palestinian state tomorrow and try to put it on an institution which is in many ways rotten and has no stable institutions on it, it will collapse. The Israeli security forces have saved President Abbas again and again. He's incapable of even sustaining his own longevity, never mind sustaining a state structure. So we have to keep that in mind. It's extremely important. We would have an interest in having a more stable, more transparent Palestinian Authority that is capable of sustaining a state structure. We don't have it. It may take time. Let's keep in mind that it took us 60 years, from the 1880s to the 1940s, to build the institutions upon which this state, to this day, rests. Let's give the Palestinians the same opportunity.
Great. And then following on that, what are some steps that Israel maybe can do to try to make that reality closer? And then what are steps that the Palestinians should be doing?
Well, we are doing those steps right now, and I've been involved in several of them. We presented President Trump with a list of confidence-building measures designed to materially enhance Palestinian quality of life, Palestinian economy in Judea and Samaria. I was involved in one particular effort to reduce the waiting time across the Allenby Bridge. It's actually the biggest crossing between Jordan and the West Bank. 2.5 million Palestinians pass over that bridge every year. They wait on average of 6 hours a day. And by reducing that 6-hour wait to a half-hour wait, we've been able to not only cut down on all the friction, but we've been able to add millions of labor hours to the Palestinian economy. That's just one small gesture. So we're doing a number of these now. Palestinians, what they can do for us, they can stop teaching their kids to hate and kill us. That's the bottom line. You know, in Knesset, I chaired a secret subcommittee that looked at Palestinian incitement in the West Bank. And I'll tell you, I've seen a lot in my day. I've been in the military for many years. I've been in war. What I saw in that secret meetings made me sick to my stomach. And that's got to stop. There's just never, ever going to be peace if the Palestinian Authority continues to educate its kids to massacre Jews and likens us to monkey and pigs that deserve nothing better than to be butchered. And that's the situation. That's what the Palestinians can do for us. We hope that by bringing in other regional actors, that they can do something for us, opening up the Arab world to Israeli businesses, for example, which will enable us to explain to our people in Israel why it's worthwhile to take risks for peace.
Okay, the next question is from Rabbi Joel Schwartzman, and he is also sort of responding to the idea that we're all sort of on the front line in terms of Israel these days. So he asks, how does one respond to the Palestinian suffering, which is consistently captured in the media's attention and the world's sympathy? And bringing in some of the other questions specifically, recently there's been a lot of articles describing the occupation. How would you recommend to us who care about Israel, how should we approach these?
Well, first of all, put it in perspective. 90% of the Palestinians in the West Bank do not come into any contact with Israelis. Go to Ramallah and tell me that looks like a city that is suffering under a brutal occupation. We should all live as well as many people do in Ramallah. This doesn't mean there aren't friction points. This doesn't mean that there aren't unpleasantries and there are roadblocks and checkpoints. Every day, 150,000 Palestinians enter Israel. They wait on average between 4 and 7 minutes at most checkpoints. They make a good salary. Israel exports all of the produce from the West Bank through our port of Haifa because Palestinians can no longer export through Haifa. There are many aspects of coexistence that we have. Yes, there is a military law in force in the West Bank, a mixture of Jordanian and British military law. People don't want Israeli law imposed on the West Bank. I'm often surprised to hear that. Why don't we have two different types of law? I don't think people want Israeli law to be imposed there. That would mean annexation. We don't want that. We understand that these territories are to be negotiated about in the future, and until such time, our position was and remains that we're willing to negotiate with the Palestinians today, right here in my living room, without preconditions, to reach a final status agreement. It begs the question whether the Palestinian leadership is either interested, capable, willing to do this, but we are ready and willing. And I firmly believe that if a Palestinian leader comes forward and makes a genuine offer for peace, one that will not endanger the Jewish state, one that will give us recognition and permanence and legitimacy in the Middle East, the Israeli people will support it.
Great. Another question just came in, focusing specifically on Gaza. Can you explain to those who are listening in sort of Israel's positions vis-a-vis Gaza? And again, how would you recommend that we talk about these issues?
Well, about 80% of my time is spent on the Gaza issue. Gaza, Israel has no desire to see a worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza. 1,000 truckloads of goods and humanitarian equipment go into Gaza every single day through Israel. It has to be inspected 3 different times. And it goes into Gaza. Gaza is under the rule of a radical Islamic terrorist regime known as Hamas. We didn't put it there. The Palestinians put it there. By the way, Hamas is very popular in the in Gaza, as it is in the West Bank. It's not as if the Palestinian population there is languishing under Hamas rule. And that is an organization, Hamas, that actively seeks our destruction and rejects peace with Israel. And so we can't have an open border with it. We have a legitimate, by the way, internationally recognized legal maritime blockade of Gaza. At such a time as the Hamas regime collapses and a more moderate leadership takes place, the situation in Gaza will change. Until that time, Israel has to do what it needs to do to defend its population.
Great. And moving towards some more positive ways of looking at what we can do, for people who want to engage in promoting peace, promoting tolerance, promoting communication and dialogue, how would you suggest that the average person who wants to move these issues forward, especially from America, how would you suggest that we do these?
Well, it can be done on many different levels. I've been involved in several efforts of interfaith, reaching out to mainstream Muslim leaders in the United States. Some of these efforts have been very successful. Actually, there's a waiting list now to get involved in several of these efforts. I think the most important thing to remember when talking about the peace process, talking about the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, is that for an entire generation of Israelis, young people, I meet with them all the time, they don't remember Begin and Sadat in the Egyptian-Israeli peace. They don't remember the Oslo Accords. They don't remember King Hussein and Yitzhak Rabin signing peace between Jordan and Israel. What they remember are buses being blown up and rockets falling on their neighborhood. And when you try to sell them this notion that somehow if we give up territory, we're going to get peace, they're going to look at you like you fell off the moon. And they're right. And they're right. And the most important thing for our American supporters, particularly in the American Jewish community, to understand is that our historical experience has been different, particularly for young Israelis. And you cannot convince them easily that by pulling out of Judea and Samaria, creating a Palestinian state there, that their lives will be enhanced. They believe that they will be physically, mortally endangered by that. And that's the kind of argument you have to make when I go in front of those audiences. They look at me like I'm crazy because I support the peace process. Understand what Israel's been through, understand our point of view, understand our experiences, and put that in the context of a Middle East that is unraveling all around us. All around us. We cannot have Syria. We can't have Yemen. We can't have Iraq on our border.
Thank you so much. And do you have advice for sort of the Jewish community here as a whole who's grappling with these issues, where we often find ourselves very polarized between the left and the right and many other dividing lines? Do you have any advice if we want to try to not all have the same view, but try to unify around sort of the core issues about caring about Israel, caring about the world Jewish community?
Well, I make it specific about the Six-Day War. I think I've made that case, that this was a war that Israel didn't want, it didn't anticipate, had no intention of expanding territorially, was mortally threatened, and when it emerged victorious was very magnanimous in offering its hand for peace, and that hand was turned away repeatedly. That's about the 67 war. About the Jewish state, I sit at a certain, I have a very good perspective on this. I'm very blessed from my perspective because I've been involved in Israeli governance and Israeli diplomacy, but I've also been an historian. I've been an Israeli Jew and an American Jew. And I have a sense of place and moments in history. We live at an extraordinary moment in history. Let's take a step back, from the pages of the New York Times and other exalted publications, and just remember when and where you're living. You're living at a time in history when there are two vital, flourishing, strong Jewish communities in the world. There's an independent Jewish state, which is one of the most developed states in the world, one of the most militarily proficient states in the world, where Judaism and Jewish identity are flourishing. By the way, has the fastest growing and youngest population of any industrialized country in the world. We are making babies here too, and replenishing the Jewish people every single day. Take a step back and realize that you are living in the time of nothing less than miracles, and appreciate that. Always deeply appreciate that. Say the bracha.
That's amazing. Thank you. And could you comment a little more, perhaps on the recent U.S. administration visit to Israel and where you see U.S.-Israel relationship heading right now?
Well, we had a very good visit from President Trump. As I said before, he flew directly from Saudi Arabia. It was the first. He went to the Kotel. That was the first. It is the first sojourn by a sitting president to Israel. By the way, it's not as common as people think. Only 6 presidents have been here. There's only been 9 presidential visits. The first one was in 1974. And even Israeli prime ministers didn't visit the White House before 1968. David Ben-Gurion was never in the White House. And so this is deeply appreciated. We were disappointed that the embassy didn't move to Jerusalem. We'd hoped that. I hope it will happen in the future. It's an anomaly in our relationship. For the record, since you're in Washington, D.C., I'll tell you, unreservedly that Israel does recognize Washington, D.C. as the capital of the United States. We're not going with New York. We're not going with Philadelphia. We're sticking with Washington. And we hope that what the president talked about repeatedly, about opportunities for peace, that we can take advantage of these opportunities. He's particularly talking about the closest relationships between Israel and Sunni Arab states. We agree on Iran, we agree on Syria, we agree on the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, we agree on ISIS, we agree on so much. Now's the time to take advantage of this confluence of interests and perhaps move the Palestinian issue to a different place.
Great. We have about 5 minutes left of the call. I wanted to ask you if, after hearing all these questions, is there any closing remarks or any messages you want to leave the participants of this call, anything to think about as we go through this entire year of really marking the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War?
Well, it's to keep in perspective all the time. Look at where Israel was on the 5th of June, 1967. Without secure borders, surrounded by massive Arab armies, with a traumatized population, a small population, and not able to access our holiest sites. Think about that Israel, totally isolated in the world without any friends, and then think about Israel in 2017. Flash forward 50 years. And here is another moment where you got to pinch yourself. This is Israel, which has now for more than a quarter of a century a flourishing relationship with China. Our trade with China goes up 30–35% every year. India is one of our closest allies in the world. Prime Minister Modi has said that he cannot envisage a future for India without the state of Israel. The former Soviet Union is broken up. We have a good relationship with Russia. Some of the former Soviet satellite countries are our closest allies in the world. The Czech Republic just voted to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Africa, which had cut off ties after the '73 war, the African states are now lining up to renew those ties. We have this multifaceted, exceptionally deep strategic alliance with the United States, and really bipartisan, wonderful relationship. We have an army that's twice as big, more than twice as big as France and Britain's armies combined. We face no major armies on our borders anymore. We face unconventional threats, but no major armies on our borders anymore. Our borders in that way are secure to a degree that was unthinkable in 1967. Peace with Jordan, peace with Egypt, a confluence of interests with Arab states. I want you to think, I can go on and on, by the way, about our innovation, our economy, our universities, where we have come in the last 50 years. The Aliyah from the former Soviet Union. It's amazing what has gone on here. And always keep that in perspective. Yes, we have controversies. Whether it be the settlements, the Palestinians. Don't let anybody tell you that this isn't a story which has no parallel in modern history. In terms of our achievements in such a short period of time, there is nothing like the state of Israel. And there's nothing like the state of Israel's alliance with the United States of America and our relationship, our kinship with American Jewry.
Thank you so much for this really inspiring webinar, Dr. Oren. We really just want to thank Deputy Minister Dr. Oren again for speaking with us, and thank you all for joining us. We invite you to join us for future webinars, calls, and programs featuring a variety of experts, policymakers, and thought leaders on issues of significance to our community. We will upload the recording of this webinar to our digital toolkit, www.jcouncil.org/6daywar, where you can also, by the way, find many of the articles that Dr. Oren has written over the years, and links to his books. And we will distribute the link for the recording on the JCRC's weekly email going out tomorrow. We encourage you to share it with your friends and your colleagues. Thank you again for all who participated and asked questions.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Oren. Thank you all so much for joining.